Today is Sunday, April 18th, 2021. My name is Kate Alvarez, and I'm interviewing Monica Perez for the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Monica, that this recorded interview will be placed in the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin and the Brown University Library's digital repository. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's a topic that you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we can discuss it. Participation in this study is completely voluntary, and you are free to withdraw from the interview at any time. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to participate in this interview. I will ask you a series of 5 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. Voices of a Pandemic wishes to archive your interview, along with any other photographs and other documentation that you wish to contribute at the Benson Library at UT Austin and Brown University's digital repository. The Voces Oral History Project will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials that you choose to donate. Number 1, do you give the Voices of a Pandemic project consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Benson Library and Brown University's digital repository?
Yes, I agree.
All right, number 2, do you grant the Voices of a Pandemic project copyright over the interview and any material that you choose to provide?
Yes, I agree.
All right, number 3, do you agree to allow Voices of a Pandemic to post this interview on the internet via the Voices Oral History Center's YouTube channel where it may be viewed by the public?
Yes, I agree.
Awesome. So we have many questions in a pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure server at the University of Texas, Austin. Before we send your information from the pre-interview form to the Benson Library, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members. So that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library. Number 4, do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file to researchers at the Benson Library?
I agree. It's okay.
Number 5, on occasion, the Voces Oral History Center receives requests from journalists who wish to contact individuals who have participated as narrators in oral history interviews. The Voces Oral History Center only responds to reputable news outlets. Do you give consent for Voces to share your phone number or email with journalists that are interested in your story?
Sure.
All right. Thank you for agreeing and thank you for your time. Before we begin with your experience during the pandemic, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Monica Perez-Garcia, and I work at the Miriam Hospital in intermediate level floor.
All right. And where are you from?
My parents were, I'm from Mexico, but I live in Providence, Rhode Island.
Awesome. And how long have you lived here in Rhode Island? Did you grow up here?
Nope, we moved here in 1992.
Awesome. All right. So you mentioned that you work at Miriam Hospital as a nursing assistant, correct?
Correct.
All right. So how did you end up working in healthcare?
I've always loved to help people, and healthcare just seemed to be one way of helping people
Awesome.
out.
So what exactly do you do? Like what type of patients are you mainly seeing?
Well, we see mostly like surgical patients. It's anyone like doesn't meet the requirements to be on a regular floor. We see them if they need a lot of oxygen. We see COVID patients, surgery patients, a little bit of everything.
Cool. So describe to me an average day working pre-COVID-19.
Pre-COVID-19 was a lot better. We would get like surgery patients, and we would have to just make sure we get them up, we get them moving, making sure they're walking, making sure their exercises are done, making sure like they bathe, they brush their teeth, all that, take their blood pressure, check their blood sugar, and things like that.
Would you say things were a bit more simpler, easier to do?
Yes, a lot simpler, more manageable to be
Mm.
exact.
So how did you first learn about COVID?
Through the social media, the news, it was just spread like wildfire.
How was your reaction to that?
Scared, especially because we were starting to see COVID patients come into work. So we didn't really know how to handle it.
Mm. So describe your day as best as you can when you realize the seriousness of COVID. So you mentioned that you learned about it through social media. At first, did you believe it was serious?
Oh yes, always believed it was serious. It
Oh,
always had, yeah.
how was your job affected? Did you lose hours, work more? Did you see new coworkers or have to say goodbye to some?
We have a lot of coworkers left because they went to proceed like to go help in like different cities where COVID was higher at like a rise in COVID cases. Work hours, there was plenty of work. We were always like in need of help.
Was it was it a little bit hard to adjust to any new protocols that the hospital implemented?
Oh, it was difficult. Every day we had new protocols. It was almost like new ideas every day were popping up. We have to do this one day, and the next day you go back to work. Oh no, that we're not doing that. We're doing this now.
Mm.
Had to quickly adjust to whatever the new protocols were coming in.
Did you see this coming by any chance?
No, not really.
When the virus was first kind of being shown in the news and stuff, and you were having all of these kind of policies implemented, if you could compare where you are now in terms of like protocols and how your employer has handled the pandemic, and if you were to compare it to the very beginning, did you see any of these like more strict and harsher protocols coming, like the serious lockdowns or the fact that you have to wear these masks all the time?
Well, we kind of saw the like serious lockdowns happening because of the way it was spreading. It was easily spread,
Mm.
and the protocols. It was just like you had to. It was really frightening because you really didn't know if you were really protecting yourself from this. Like you were walking in not knowing if this was proper the proper care. Hold on one second. What happened here? Can you still see me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know where you went. Sorry. There we go. Sorry. I was like, where did you go?
No
So
worries.
so it's like we didn't know what was happening. Like we one day they were giving us one mask and telling us we had to use that one mask for all day. Then the next day it's like you're throwing it away. So it was just a conflict of everything happening all at the same time.
Mhm. At that point, like in the very beginning, when things were very uncertain, did you ever kind of question your position in the hospital? Did you ever think to yourself, I'm not safe here, maybe I should take some time off? Or was your main goal to help people as best as you can?
Well, it was kind of like our main goal was to stick together and get through it together as a department. So we kind of all just like we would say we can cheer each other on and make sure we gave each other positive feedback to because we all knew we were in this like we were drowning but we didn't know like we had to stick together to get through it. So it wasn't my time to say okay I got to walk away from this. It wasn't like an idea that I ever had.
Mhm. Has your employer offered any resources to help you and your coworkers during this time?
Yes, we have resources. We have a hotline too that you can call if you feel that you need to speak to someone.
So you wouldn't say you've have felt any like frustrations. You feel like your employer's done a pretty good job with offering you resources.
Yeah, they've done a pretty good job.
That's good.
I think it's more depending on the individual if they've reached out for the resources.
Do you remember your first interaction with a COVID patient? How did you feel?
Frightening, scared,
Frightening?
mortified. Like it was a roller coaster of emotions. Like you just didn't know what you were walking into.
Did you feel prepared, or did you feel prepared as best as you could in that moment?
We felt prepared as best as we could, but
Mhm.
also at the same time we had fear because, like I said, the protocols were changing every day. That we really didn't know which was the safest way for us to be protected.
Mhm. And how have you changed since that moment? When you see COVID patients now, do you feel more prepared? Um, how are patients feeling?
Oh, when you see COVID patients now, you're it's like it's a routine now. Like you're oh, okay. You've gotten adjust to the policies. I mean, everything that's been implemented hasn't changed much anymore. So it's like you feel like the training wheels have came off and you're good to go.
Have you noticed a difference with patient response? So at first, I'm assuming people were a bit frightened as to what was happening. Now, would you say that people are a bit are less frightened?
They're still frightened, just the fact because they're always alone. They can't have any
Mhm.
visitors. So there's pretty fear and they're always in doubt of happening, what's going on, why is this beeping? When they don't really know what's happening, they have a lot of questions
Mhm.
and a lot of fear in them. So that hasn't really changed.
So, given like the political climate and what we saw with President Trump's administration, have you seen a difference with patients with their response to the virus, and that some are more concerned about it and some are taking it a little bit less serious?
Yes, we've had a mixture of like some patients that still come in and they've require a lot of help and a lot of medical treatment and they still like, oh no, this is not happening to me. I don't have it. This is false. This is just a political propaganda. So you do get that aspect of the patients and you just have to treat it as best as you can.
Hmm. So, have you come across patients who are less concerned with the effects of the virus and more concerned with their treatment and how they will be helped by healthcare workers? So, people who kind of understand the severity of the virus, but they maybe have had some previous help from someone in the healthcare field that wasn't good. And so now they kind of have like a little bit of distrust towards healthcare workers. Have you had somebody who was kind of concerned in that way of how they were going to be treated and if they were going to be treated as best as possible?
Mhm. We've had a lot of like people because they feel they don't speak English as good that they feel like, oh, I don't understand, or can you get me someone? And sometimes the language difference has made a big difference in how they feel
Mhm.
because sometimes we didn't have interpreters that can go into the room. We had to use a tablet. So it was very different. And if you're confused, you're not going to really understand that someone's talking to you through a phone or something like that to help you understand what the next process is for your treatment.
Mhm.
So it's been kind of tough on that end.
Have you noticed any forms of relief from a patient who identifies with any of your identities? So, for example, you are a Latinx woman and you speak Spanish, right?
Yes.
So, have you noticed any patient kind of relieved when they found out, when they saw you and said, "Oh, this woman looks a little bit like me," or "She speaks Spanish," or "I'm glad that it's a woman and not a male"? Have you seen any
Yeah.
forms of relief from people?
I've seen a lot of forms of relief just because I can communicate with them better, or if they need something at that moment they can actually get their say what they need and not have to wait, delay in their care for whatever they need, or if they're having a complication with something I can get them the help that they need faster than having to say, hold on, let me go find their iPad to come and help you. So that has made a big plus in their treatment, I feel.
Mhm. So, when we first spoke about this interview, you mentioned that you work in Providence and that the majority of the patients that you help are from the Latinx community. How do you feel about that? Is there any sort of anger, confusion, surprise, or frustration with the fact that the virus has mainly targeted or impacted communities of color?
Not frustrated, but more or less like I felt like helpless because I wanted to make sure that people knew that it was affecting us a lot more than it was affecting anyone else. And it's like, how do you get the awareness out to everyone to understand like this is it's really affecting more of the minority base, your low income minorities. It's like, how do you get the word out for everyone to understand like we have more to lose than the average person because we don't really have a lot of health experience or like know what's going on in the health.
Mhm. So, kind of outside of your position in the hospital, how have, if at all, the organizations that you are a part of provided resources regarding COVID? So, your local church or community neighborhood service organization or school for your child, how have they kind of responded?
With school, I mean, they've handled it well. They've like separated the programs into two different programs, one at school and one at home. So instead of having 30 kids in classroom, it's only 15 kids to classroom. And then the other 15 are from home. And then different organizations have helped. Like I've helped volunteer with like passing out food or like vaccine clinics and things like that just to get the word out to that there is help out there.
That's good. How has the pandemic impacted you kind of outside of that? So your family members, your neighbors, kids, friends. Has anybody gone through a particularly hard time?
No one yet that I know of. I mean, there's a lot of people that we know that have had it, but no one that has seriously been affected by it, thank God.
Mhm,
And I hope it stays that way. But
mhm,
I mean, I think once it affects you personally in a different level, I think it becomes more of a, like, you get scared more.
mhm, definitely. So among your friends and family, is there a difference of opinion with regards to the severity of the virus? So have you had to kind of explain to a family member or maybe somebody at the hospital to like truly take this virus seriously?
During like friends and family, there's a big discrepancy in how I feel versus how other people see it. But I think I have a different perspective because I have lived through it and I've been there and I've held people's hands and done different things that I never thought I would do in my life versus someone just listening it through the news or
Mhm,
social media. So I think once you live in it and you experience it,
mhm.
you have a different ball field than from everybody else.
Has this like difference in opinion kind of affected your relationship with anybody to the point where, maybe you see them in a different way, maybe you like respect them a little bit less, or vice versa, you respect them a bit more, you're a bit surprised that maybe they did take it seriously?
Kind of think of them as a different way. Like you, like especially like political views, and now with COVID, you kind of like, oh, I never expected this from you. So you don't want to have like change how you feel about them, but at the same time, you kind of like, I see your true colors now.
Mm,
So it kind of makes you change like your perspective on that person or individual.
mhm. So you said that like your position as a healthcare worker obviously has had a huge impact on how you view this virus because you're seeing it firsthand, you're treating people who have it. Um, would you feel as though if you weren't in this position, if you didn't work in the healthcare field, that you would still hold this same viewpoint?
Maybe not as severe as I do now.
Mm,
Maybe I would be more of like the general population that's kind of hold it severe, but not as much as I do now.
mhm. Has there been any internal conflict with your position as a healthcare worker and your political beliefs? So I know some people, or there have been stories where healthcare workers, they obviously have to follow protocols implemented by the hospital or wherever they work. But because of their political views, they're not necessarily pleased with it. So have you had that internal conflict within yourself?
No, not at all. Most of the protocols and things that they have followed, I've agreed with and I had followed them as much as I can.
That's good. So are there any like measures that President Trump or Biden implemented that you didn't or still don't agree with?
I mean, Donald Trump just didn't believe in it at all, and that was just a downfall because of the hierarchy. The highest person of your country doesn't really think this is something serious. Obviously your people that follow you are going to believe the same thing. So it's kind of like I didn't think he handled it properly as some severity of what it was. And he just kind of sugarcoated things and it wasn't done right
Mhm.
in my perspective.
When President Biden took office, did you feel some sort of relief?
I did. I felt like we finally had someone that was trying to get a hold of this and take control of the wheel and make sure that all Americans were trying to get safe and get the vaccines out and get the awareness out. Like, keep your mask on, for example. He always has one on versus Donald Trump. You barely saw him with one on.
Mhm,
So that was just a big plus for me in my perspective.
mhm. So with the state of Rhode Island right now, are you satisfied with the measures that the state has taken?
Yeah.
So we last year about May, I think we opened up again. Do you think that was a good time or too early, too late?
With that, it's like you never know.
Yeah.
It's if you open up too early, then people are not happy. If you open up late, it's just kind of I feel like people are just going to do what they want to do, regardless of what the protocols are from the governor.
Mhm.
So that's it's a tricky one.
How about with the vaccine? When news started coming out of the vaccine, Were you kind of already on board of when this comes out and when I am eligible, I will take it, or did you want to give it a bit more time?
At first, I was very skeptical and I wanted to give
Mhm.
it more time. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this. But then after doing my research and just seeing like how it just has helped. And yes, you can still get it, but the severity of you getting it is not as intense as if you didn't have the shot. And
Right.
just seeing it from firsthand how much people have suffered, we were on board right away.
So, do you feel pretty confident right now with the way the United States is headed? Do you think they're headed in the right direction with like vaccine distribution?
I mean, in some states, yes, in other states, I do
Yeah.
not. So that, but I mean, like we said it before, it all depends on the individual. The resources are out there, it just depends for you to follow them.
Mhm. So, can you tell me like a moment right now that brings you joy, or like the first moment you felt joy in a while? Because obviously, with when everything first happened, it must have been very tough to kind of have so much chaos and uncertainty around. Do you remember the first moment of 2020, honestly, where you kind of felt relieved or where you felt like you genuinely had a good day?
It would kind of be like when in the summer when you could actually go out into just go for a walk or just go for a hike or just get outdoors and feel the fresh air. Especially like when you leave work and you feel all that stress, like you just needed something to relieve that stress. And then 2020, when all this happened, it was kind of in the midst of winter, so you kind of just had to cocoon at home, and you really there was things to do, but not as much. So I feel like that was more like depressing. And
Mhm.
then once the summer and the nice weather came, it's like you felt like you took a load off and you can breathe and you can go for a walk, you can go for a bike. So it was just like different activities that you could do that you couldn't do in the beginning.
Mhm. In the beginning, like during the quarantine and the 2 weeks that we kind of had to stay inside, um, how was it coming home from work? So, did you take any kind of procedures to make sure that your family was safe?
Oh yeah, my whole like perspective changed. Like you had to bring 2 pairs of shoes,
Mm,
bring extra clothes. Like you changed out of your dirty clothes at work and you put them in the bag. You came home right away. You threw them in the laundry. No more like putting them in the hamper. Um, Kind of just making sure like you do like a surgical scrub of washing your hands before you even left work.
mhm,
And whatever containers you brought to work, like you make sure like you disinfected them really good. It's
mhm,
like a lot more process went into just leaving work. You weren't just like walking out and you're like, okay, my shift is over.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
At home, do you still kind of hold those same procedures, like, to this day?
Yeah, I still do.
That's good, yeah. So, back to your employer, can you describe them, like, a little bit more, and how long have you worked for them?
It will be 6 years in May. I work for the Miriam Hospital, which is part of Lifespan Corporation.
6 years, wow.
It doesn't feel like it, I guess.
Um, so tell me about a patient's case that kind of stands out to you a bit.
So many stand out. Um, we've had patients where they make it and you
Mhm,
get to see them walk out and you're like, yay, you know,
mhm,
it's something that, I mean, I think I have a handful of all the patients that we took care of since last year that only have walked out
mhm,
from our department. So
mhm.
sorry.
It's okay. It's an emotional topic.
Yeah, it's so seeing them walk out and seeing them that they can go to their families, it's
Yeah.
that's the best highlight of your day.
How have you kind of, have you learned any new hobbies or read books to kind of, take your mind away from any sort of, like, sadness that you may feel from your work?
I've learned to meditate, a lot of meditation, which I've never done before. Um, just deep breathing. And I've also just learned to just take care of me.
Mhm,
I had never gotten like a full body massage or done anything for myself. And I
mhm,
said that this will be the year that every month I'll dedicate something to just me. And
mhm,
I've done it so far.
mhm. That's good. to definitely have some sort of self-care system
Hmm.
to take your mind away from all of that.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. So how did your employer kind of respond to sick employees? Or have you been sick? Have you had to kind of um, stay home just in case?
I haven't been sick yet. Um, in in the beginning, everything was just, it all depended on your, on like how you came in contact with it. There was really no protocols. It kind of was based on individual basis, so it was kind of difficult. Now, I mean, now it's like more or less like, okay, you're vaccinated, you can still come to work, like you're
Mhm.
okay. It's like, but I'm not okay. I was just exposed. What about the other person that hasn't been vaccinated? Now I'm exposing her or him. So it's kind of, it's a tricky situation. But I mean, you, I guess if you do come exposed, you just let them know, and they, whatever they decide is what you do.
Mhm. So at any point, have you had concerns about finances?
No, not at all.
No, you felt pretty stable throughout this whole thing, and you haven't really felt concerned that you would find yourself in a situation of maybe I need another job or I won't be able to make rent this week. I mean, this month.
Hmm. No, not a, something like that.
That's
Financially has not been a problem for us. We've
that's
been
good.
fortunate in that department.
Um, so you're a parent, obviously. Has COVID impacted your ability to parent?
Um,
Like, do you kind of take a few more safety measures now with your child? Like you can't go out at this time, or you can't go out this often. You can't go out with certain people, anything like that.
it's more or less like if you're going some, like who's gonna be there, who's there, what are you guys doing? But I mean, he's mostly been around with the same people,
Okay,
so it's not like he's out venturing with everyone. So it's a little different. He's more of a homebody too, so I don't really have to say no as often.
That's good. Yeah. Um, has COVID impacted your ability to kind of be a wife to your husband?
No, I'm just crazier than before, but that's
Just crazier than before. Since you're a healthcare worker, has he been patient with kind of things that you've had to do that are a little bit out of the ordinary? Like maybe you said you kind of take more measures to keep your house clean. Has he been patient with you?
yes.
That's
He's
good.
been my shoulder to cry on when I can't get the words out and I just have to come home and just sob to get my feelings out. He's been there for that and supported me through my cleaningness and all the crazy tasks that I have done. Yes.
That is good. Um, let's see. Um, okay. All right. So let me just pause. Okay, I think we're back now. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties with like Wi-Fi and stuff.
Okay, no worries. I'm still here.
Oh, good. Okay. So could you just go a little bit more into depth um, about like what you've seen with the Latinx community and how they've experienced this virus?
So being like the firstborn, like coming from my parents being like illegal immigrants and being here in Rhode Island, I'm a legal resident now. But I've also seen like a lot of undocumented people or uninsured people that wait very last minute because they're scared because of their status or they're not insured to come into the hospital. And then once they come in, they have other medical problems that they never thought they had. So then they escalated of care turns into something more because now you're only treating people for COVID, but you're also treating them for high blood pressure. You're treating them, they have diabetes that they never knew they had diabetes. And it's a lot of information to take in all at once. And then you have like the language barrier, and it's like different things that I feel like I that we as a community should encourage each other to see the doctor and not kind of depend on your home remedies for different situations that we always have being brought up culturally, Mexican ways, things like that.
So for those folks that are undocumented or are just kind of in sensitive positions in terms of like their citizenship in this country, how have you tried to best help them?
I've always just tried to encourage them to just seek for help. When it comes to healthcare, your status doesn't really, I mean, doesn't matter. They're gonna treat you as the individual, and they're not gonna question how, like, they're not gonna ask for payment or anything like that. Sometimes you also hear like the patients be like, "Oh my God, this bill is gonna be so expensive," or "How am I ever gonna pay this?" And it's kind of like you just have to encourage them, like, that's not something for you to worry about right now. Let's worry about getting you better and getting you out of here. And then when that point comes, then we can look for other resources to help you out. So it's kind of like you have to take your mind away from it.
Mhm. Have you had any patient that was like so concerned with their financial status and their financial ability to pay that they kind of just maybe left a bit too early or kind of refused to have any sort of treatment done and decided that their best option was to treat it themselves?
Mm, we haven't had that yet happen. It's been more or less like, why are we doing this? Like, I came in for this reason, and now you're telling me I have something else, and I didn't come in for that reason. So why are you doing this procedure, or why am I taking this medication now? A lot of their lack of healthcare, or what's going on with their body, their anatomy, they just don't seem to grasp it all. And since they're coming in sick, it's a lot for them to take in and all at once.
Mhm. So yeah, you have noticed like this kind of pattern with like the Latinx community that um like yeah, they come in sometimes a bit too late. And there's like just like fear of payment and whatnot. Um, do you think that can be attributed to like or like how do you think it is attributed to the way our culture is?
I think a lot of our culture, we don't encourage to run to the doctors right away if we have a migraine. We have a migraine, we tend to call our aunt or our godmother, like, can you give me a home remedy for this? And then you're like, oh, okay, that worked, and you forget about it. It's not like we're, oh, I have a migraine, and then you keep getting them, and you're like, this is not right. Let me call the doctor. We kind of, a culture is just based on like, let me drink this tea, or let me take this like herb with something mixed with something else, and it'll go away. But I think it's more our culture that has molded us to do those steps before we actually seek out for any healthcare problems. And then by the time we do seek out for help, our problem is way far more advanced than what it should be.
Mhm. How about differences in gender? So among like the Latinx patients that you have seen, um, w- how would you describe the differences between like the responses coming from males and females and people who identify other than those two?
Males are very more, they're more stubborn, but like that goes against to our culture. They're more stubborn to, I don't have that, or I'm fine, look at me. Like, I kind of feels like if they get sick, like it's bursting their male ego or something. They kind of feel like, oh no, I'm a man, I can't get sick, like I have to work and provide for my family, I can't be here. Like, they're always looking for ways to speed up the care so they can get out faster because they need to go out to work to provide for their family. With women, they're kind of more like always concerned about what's happening at home, but I think that's just a mother thing, and what's happening with their kids, and how are they getting to school and things like that. It's a different perspective.
Mhm. So do you think you find it a bit easier to communicate with like women or people who identify as a woman?
More or less, yes, because you can understand like what they're coming from. As a mother, you kind of know that you, even if you're sick, you're not worried about yourself, you're worried about everyone else around you. So you connect easier. With men, you kind of have to give them that tug, like, okay, like it's okay. Like just calm
Mhm.
down and we're get through this and you'll be okay. So you kind of just have to remind them of that.
How about patients who aren't a part of like the Latinx community? Like, what do you see as a difference between the two? Like, do you think when it comes to an illness or some sort of pain that they rely on the doctor a bit more?
Mm, I I feel like more minorities always don't really rely on the doctor as much as we should,
Hmm.
especially here in America where you can just go to the doctors and get free healthcare, or there's many resources that you don't have to pay for things. You just have to know which door to look into. I feel like a lot of minorities tend to wait to receive the proper care for anything.
Hmm.
So then by the time they come in, they don't have really many resources to point them in the right direction.
Aside from obviously, culture and the way you've been raised playing a role into that kind of response, um, do you think that given like the United States and its history with like minorities, do you think that also plays a role into maybe why they're a bit hesitant to visit the doctor?
I feel like a lot of it is fear because, they could think that, oh, I'm going to reach out for help. And then what if my, say, immigration status comes up? Like, what if something happens from that? Like their mind tends to escalate to a different scenario where when you go to healthcare, they're going to just worry about your health issues. They're not worrying about the other stuff unless they have to worry about you needing financial help to pay for your prescriptions, then it becomes a different situation. But
Mhm. Um, how about like with you personally? Like, how has your mental health kind of dealt with this? Like, how we spoke a bit earlier about how you've sought ways to kind of help like through meditation and hobbies and whatnot. Have you seen like have you seen your mental health improve, or have you seen a drastic change this last year? Like maybe it got worse at the beginning and then it got better and now it's like really well, or maybe it's gone a bit worse. Like how has your journey been with that?
journey has been with mental health, it has been very difficult just because it's been very depressing. It's been like an emotional roller coaster, and you tend to have more of a softer side for different scenarios. You could be watching a movie that you already watched and you don't see that sadness in it, but now all of a sudden you watch it and you can't stop crying because it reminds you of things that are happening in the hospital as we speak, or it reminds you of like different patients that the different interactions that you've had with them. So it's gone like up and down, and you kind of just have to like take control of it. And like I said earlier, meditation has been a big part of me to like even just sit for like 5 minutes and just try to relax. When I'm at work, I take my break sometimes away from people just to keep myself that peace of mind and just be to myself without having to hear everyone talking and things like that.
Mhm. Have you how have you kind of dealt with like your social life? Like have you drastically limited the amount of people that you allow yourself to see?
Yes, I don't see as many people as I used to see. I
That's good.
tend to keep to my inner bubble. Sometimes not a smart idea, but sometimes you're like, oh, I'm fine, and everyone's fine, and then boom, things happen, and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have gone to that party, or maybe I
Mhm.
shouldn't have done this. So you kind of, it's hard because you don't want to keep isolating yourself and being like secluded and kind of be like put that fear in you that like you can't continue life, but at the same time you have to know like once you're out and you're exposing yourself, you don't know what can happen. And it's
Mhm.
not just you going to say someone's house, it's you're bringing, if that's so and so, you're at somebody's house and then now you're coming back, now you're exposing other people, not just you. So that's the kind of mentality that I have, that it's not just about me, it's about my parents since they live upstairs.
Mhm.
I don't have to protect me, I have to protect them because they're older.
Mhm. Has that been kind of difficult? Have you kind of had to see them a little bit less, or when you do see them, are you like farther apart? washing your hands more when you're around them.
In the beginning, when all this happened, I distanced myself a lot from them because I felt like I was working with it, so I felt like dirty. Like I felt like I was bringing it home, and I didn't want them to be part of that. So in the beginning, I had to deal with I had to manage like it's okay, I can be with them, but I
Mhm.
have to take like wash my hands as soon as like I go to their house or like different measures that I used to do, but I didn't think about them. I just did them. And now in the pandemic, it's like I drill it into my head, like, okay, you have to do this or you have to do the other thing. Like disinfecting is like a big thing now.
Mhm. So your parents are older generation Mexicans. So has there kind of been any sort of issue with relaying the severity of the virus? Like, has there been a moment where at first maybe they didn't take it as seriously just because typically what we've been seeing is that older folks are a little less concerned with it. So did you kind of have that issue with your parents?
I actually didn't have that issue with them. They took it very serious. More, they took it even more serious than I ever expected them to take it. For example, like if my dad left the house, the minute he walked out of the house, he had his mask on. If
Mhm.
he went for a walk, he had his mask on. Till this day, he doesn't leave the house without putting his mask on. I mean, he's constantly always washing his hands. I They took it in more serious than I ever thought they would take it, which for me it kind of benefited me that way because I didn't have to drill that into them.
Mhm.
So it was kind of more or less like, oh, you're just going for a walk. You don't have to wear it. He's like, oh no, I want to wear it. And, like this makes me feel safe outside. I want to wear it. And I was like, okay.
Mhm.
So it was. I didn't expect to have that reaction from them. I
Mhm.
expected more of them to be like, oh no, this is fake. It's not gonna happen.
Mhm.
But in that, it didn't go in that direction. So I was glad for that.
That's good. Yeah. Um, are you by any chance religious?
Yes, Catholic.
Have your religious views, your religious beliefs, um, kind of conflicted with your beliefs about the virus? Like, has there been any sort of has there been any sort of issue with that? Because some people kind of have more faith in their religion than they do other things, just because of how like strong a role it plays into their lives.
Like I have a lot of faith, and that has been a conflict too. Like people that have a lot of faith, they're like, oh well, I believe my God will protect me from
Mm,
this. But I also have a lot of faith in God, but at the same time, I also have a lot of faith in science. So
mhm,
I was kind of stuck in the middle. Like I knew where I wanted to be and what I chose to do, and it was kind of like I believe in God, but at the same time, like I have to protect myself and protect my family. So just because have faith in God doesn't mean He's going to protect me from everything. When
mhm,
there's other measures out there that scientifically are proven to showing you that this is what you have to do to protect yourself from the virus.
mhm. How about you among your Latinx patients? Typically, our community tends to be very religious. Have you noticed any sort of conflict there?
There has been some patients at work where they're like, my God will take care of this, or I don't believe I have COVID. This is just something God, I pray to God and God will help me get through this. And you do encourage them, yes, I believe in God as well, but right now you're really sick and they need to do this treatment for you to get better. Because sometimes I feel like they're like, oh, they say, oh, I talked to God and God doesn't want me to
Mhm,
do this. And then you kind of have to pull back and you obviously if that's their right they chose if that's what they believe you can't really force them to do anything so again you have to just talk to them and educate them to what is happening to kind of see if you can persuade their mind
mhm,
of thinking things differently because now they're taking their religious aspect to compared to what their scientifically the treatment could be
mhm,
so it's been a conflict with some patients that we've had.
mhm. So we've about reached the end of the interview. I guess my last question would be, Is there anything else that you would like to share about your experiences with COVID-19 that I have not asked?
No, I think we've touched everything.
That's good. All right. Well, we officially reached the end then. Thank you so much for setting aside time for us to go through with this. Thank you for like your patience and everything. Um, we should be good now. Thank you.
Yeah.